Hey, what's going on, y'all? Welcome to the Weekly Word, where I take a verse or two from our Sunday lectionary, readings from the previous week, and just give a short devotional, 5 minutes or so. So typically I do a single verse, but today I wanted to expand it out really to the first half of Romans 14. It's a great chapter in the book of Romans that I encourage you to read the whole thing. It's one of my favorite chapters in the book of Romans because it deals with something that can be hard to understand, especially if you're new to the faith or even looking from the outside, curious but not in. And that is the simple fact that Christians disagree and then divide over many things. And this is confusing. Why is it? Why can't we be one? Why can't we just agree on things? And so it's just a fact. And I find great comfort in knowing that even within decades of Jesus' ministry on earth, when Paul penned this great epistle, his followers disagreed about some things. And sometimes, we can think that, man, if we could just get back to exactly how it was, in the early church, that everything would be fine, but it's not the case. So anyway, here's what's happening. You have a hot topic of the day, really two hot topics, and that is the issue of whether or not it's okay as a follower of Christ to eat meat that has been dedicated to Roman gods. Obviously, this is something that is so foreign to us, but it was a big issue in the early church, as that was a common thing. And there was also another hot topic of the day was how important is it to celebrate certain holy days, especially those that were practiced by Jewish Christians. You have Gentile Christians, you have Jewish Christians, and you have a lot going on there. And so, big surprise, of course, Christians took two positions on this. And there was division on this. There was debate around this. And you can see this at the beginning of Romans 14 in verse 2 and 3, where Paul says that one person, he's explaining what's going on. One person believes he may eat anything, while the weak person eats only vegetables. And then he says this, let not the one who eats despise the one who abstains, and let not the one who abstains pass judgment on the one who eats, for God has welcomed him. In other words, who are you, right? Who am I to judge someone who isn't on my side or on my tribe or my team if God has welcomed them, right? Who are we? So, we can kind of take this as a template, and we can think about it. I can imagine, in the case of those who felt free to eat the meat, they would emphasize their freedom in the gospel. They would say, let's not get tied down with rules and legalism. And maybe they would even question those who don't eat meat and wonder if they're, really receive the gospel. Maybe they're just legalists, something like that. And then you have those who would abstain. Their emphasis would be on holiness and on doing what's right. And, they'd wonder maybe if those who felt free to eat the meat, were how serious they took their faith. They just seemed careless in their walk with God. That, what about the witness to the larger world? What about their need to be separate, from the larger culture? So what's fascinating about Romans 14 is that Paul doesn't try to solve this by arguing for a side. He doesn't assume that the Bible teaches one side is right, the other is wrong. He's going to say a little bit more about this later in the chapter. But in this moment, that's not his focus. His focus is pastoral. His focus is on calling them to not judge one another. Look at verse 4 here. He says, who are you to pass judgment on the servant of another? It is before his own master that he stands or falls, and he will be upheld. For the Lord is able to make him stand. And again, who are you, right? Who am I to pass judgment on the servant of another? And so this has personal application first. I think sometimes, I can be tempted to care too much about what others think. And in that moment, I come back to this passage and I remember who my real master is. Who do I stand before? It's not everyone's opinions, right? It's God. He's my master. Jesus is my master. Also, though, if I'm tempted to judge someone else's position or maybe their post on social media or whatever it is, that, I need to remember who they're really serving, right? It's not me, right? It's before his or her own master that he stands or falls. And there's a freedom in that, y'all. This is a message of freedom. In verse 8, Paul says, "For if we live to the Lord. And if we die to the Lord. So then, whether we live or whether we die, we are the Lord's." And so, I love how Paul brings up a real issue. He's not shying away from it. But in order to kind of address the real issue, he leads the believers there to something greater, to a greater truth, that we are the Lord's. And so in matters of Christian practice, right, that are secondary, let's not divide. Let's not judge one another. Let's remember that ultimately, each one of us as individuals, we live to the Lord. He's our master. We have to answer to him. Finally, I'll say this. If you're interested in learning more about Shalom Anglican and kind of our vision to start a new Anglican church here in Kitsap, jump on our blog spot, shalomanglican.blogspot.com. Sign up for our regular videos and emails. And feel free to shoot me an email as well if you want to get in touch and learn more. Also, please be praying for us. We're pretty close to begin some public meetings, not a church service, but more of an informational type meeting. And we'll be praying the evening prayer together. So be on the lookout for that. Hopefully within the next week or so, I'll be able to give you some more information on that. Thanks so much for listening.